Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're continuing with unit test. We're not talking about particular assertions. Instead, I'm going to show you some functionality, some features that we get with unit test that are really, really useful when you're testing larger applications. Oftentimes, you have code that you need to run before tests or after all your tests, whether that's having to do with a database, adding data to a database, or creating fake data that you want to use in all of your tests, create a fake user account. And you want to, instead of recreating it in every single test function, you want it to be available everywhere. We can define two methods called setup and teardown. They do have to be named in a particular way. And like I said, in a larger application, you might want some similar code to run before every test. So you put that code in setup, and it runs before every test method. Similarly, if you have code you want to run after all your tests, which if you're not using a database, is probably not that common. In our situation, we're just going to focus on setup. But imagine you are testing something with a database and you add a bunch of data into the database for your tests. You don't want to just keep it there. If you call teardown, it will remove it after every test. So that's what teardown does. So common use cases, like I said, removing or adding data from a test database, or creating instances of a class that you're going to reuse, creating some data, whether it's in a database or not, just data that you want to use in your tests. So here's an example. This doesn't do anything. But we have these two tests, test first and test second. But then we have setup and teardown. And if they're named correctly inside of this test, in a class that inherits from test case, whatever we put in here is going to run before the code in test first and before the code in test second. And whatever's in teardown will run after test first and after test second. So to help explain this, I have a class called robot. And I've already typed it up. It doesn't really matter too much. The details don't matter, but it's a class called robot. Every robot has a name, a battery level, which is a number, and a list of skills. There's a method called charge where we just set self.battery to be 100. We fully charge the battery. And then we have two methods that have a different result, different outcome, depending on the charge of the battery. So to say, when we call say name, if self.battery is positive, we're going to return beep boop, I am self.name.uppercase, and subtract one, decrement self.battery. It takes one battery to say name. And if battery is negative, we return low power, please charge and try again. Similarly, let me add some space. With learn skill, you pass in a skill to learn and a cost to learn it. And then we check, is cost to learn less than, or is battery greater than or equal to cost to learn? If it is, then we subtract the cost to learn from the battery and we append the new skill to skills. Then we return, whoa, I now know whatever the skill is, how to make a sandwich. Otherwise, we return insufficient battery, please charge and try again. Okay, so very basic robot class. Now let's write a few tests. So I have a file called robottests.py. I'm importing robot from the robot file. I just named them both. The file is robot.py, the class is robot. Import unit test, define my class, inherits from test case. And let's start by testing the charge method. So we do def test charge. And to test that, we're going to need to make a new robot. So let's go with, Mega Man equals robot. Oh, and I do need to capitalize this. That's the name of the class. Okay, so we'll just pass in name is Mega Man, and let's say battery is set to 50. At the beginning. So what I want to do is call megaman.charge and then test that charge is now 100. So I would just do self.assert equal megaman dot, and then I check for battery, comma, 100. And this should work, right? That's how the method is set up right now. Let's test it. Yes. Passing, that's all good. Now let's add one to test say name. I should mention we're not doing this TDD style. I already wrote all the code, but that's just to save time. Okay, so we want to test this. Let's go back here and do the same thing again. So def test say name. And in here, we're going to do the same thing. Make a new robot because we have to have a robot to test. Because this is a function, whatever code is in here is scoped to this. So we don't have access to it. We have to redefine it down here. Okay, so I make that again. And then I'm just going to do a self.assert equal, when I call megaman dot say name. I'm just going to copy the string here. We should get beep boop, I am Mega Man in all caps. Paste it in, put this on new lines, beep boop, I am, and then we replace this with Mega Man, like that. Okay, and on top of that, we also want to check that the battery has gone down. So that should be megaman.battery should now equal 49. Let's see if it works. Robot has no attribute. Oh, test say name. That should be say name. Oh, and we need to run say name as well. All right, so this should work. Make new Mega Man, make a new robot. We call say name, it should equal this. And after that happens, battery should have gone down, and it works. So I won't make you sit through watching me test all the other functions, but if I want to test learn skill, I would have to write, well, I would test another say name. I would test if battery was too low, so that'd be another function. Then I would test learn skill if battery was too low to learn the skill, or if there was enough battery to learn the skill. So that's three different times, three different functions at a bare minimum that I would be defining, and I'd make Mega Man again. Instead, however, we can use setup to help us out. And you might be thinking, couldn't I just, do this, put Mega Man up here, and all of them would access Mega Man? That is true, that works, but there's a difference, because whatever side effects that happen in this code would alter Mega Man, and every other test function we have would be using the exact same copy of this robot. So if we set the battery to 0, then I write another function to test that the battery should be full. If it was already set to 0 in the previous test function, it's still going to be 0. So with setup, it reruns the code every time. It doesn't run it once, it reruns it before every function. So I just write def setup, like this, camel case, self, and then we'll just do self.megaman equals, just copy this, just like that. And now what we can do is reference self.megaman in all of these instances. So let me just copy my cursor a couple times. So it does need to be self.megaman, but this code now will run before every single function, and I can now get rid of this and this as well, where I'm defining Mega Man. Let's see if it works. Awesome. Okay, so you could imagine, hopefully, if we actually wrote tests for all the other functions, and let's say we had 10 functions in that class, we could be rerunning the same code a lot. So setup is really, really useful. And teardown is exactly the same, except it runs after each one of our test functions. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Setup, you define it that way. It must be called setup. Teardown must be called teardown. Unit test looks for them automatically, and it runs them before and after each test case, respectively.